You know what? I don't actually think this song suits what we're about to do. Hang on a second. And let that be our tone setter. Today we're going to be discussing Devil May Cry 2, a game I've had the misfortune of actually having played all the way through and beaten, once and only once. You may or may not be wondering why it is I only beat this game once when I actually could play through it 3 full times to get the full story, and the answer is very simple. First of all, this game sucks, and second, and substantially more importantly, it was a rental. Now, you might be thinking, what the hell does that have to do with anything? Well, as it happens, the rental disc, case, box, whatever you want to call it, only came with one of the discs. One DVD. So, DVD, that's right. So, playing as the second character wasn't even available at the time. Now, you might be thinking, hold on, 2 DVDs for Devil May Cry 2? Yeah. Yeah. For a bit of perspective, so there's this other character called Lucia, which you can play as. We are not doing that, by the way. I don't think it's really going to change the score that much because it's barely different. It's the same missions with almost the same cutscenes, with almost the same gameplay. So, hang on, I hear you thinking. If it's near identical, what's going on here? Like, why do they need a second DVD for this? That's especially good considering that Final Fantasy X came out several years before this game and fits on one disc. But this game required 2. You know why? Because of marketing. Ironically, even though I know a decent amount about the behind the scenes going on in this game, there's still giant gaping holes because, and I'm not joking about this, everyone involved in this project is so embarrassed and ashamed about it that most of them have, to this day, in fact, to this year, is the most recent interview I read in research for this particular run, still refuse to talk in detail about exactly what happened on the development of this game. Now, we actually know several bits and pieces here or there. But to give you an example of what I'm talking about, Devil May Cry 1 was, of course, directed by Asshole. Can't even think of his damn name, and I don't care. Who would go on to do the Bayonetta series. And the Devil May Cry guy, who we'll talk about in a minute, obviously ended up finishing up this game, but he wasn't the director. Who was the director for Devil May Cry 2? That's a good question. Ladies and gentlemen, in what is actually a first for my show, I cannot tell you the project lead of Devil May Cry 2 because nobody knows who it is. I'm not making that up, by the way. You can double check me on that. Even Itsuno himself has gone out of his way to say, yeah, nope, I replaced the previous person. It was an unpleasant time. And then he'll talk about the actual development, but he won't talk about that transitionary period or whom he replaced. Just that there was a director of this game. Let's go over our history for just a moment. Let's set the tone for just a second. Resident Evil 3, sold very well after Resident Evil 2 sold bonkers well. Resident Evil was doing very well, as 700,000 people have told me in the comments section by this very moment. Resident Evil 4 was in development and led to the development of multiple other different games, of which we've actually covered 2 of them, including the eventual Resident Evil 4 itself. That led to the development of Devil May Cry as a more action-oriented franchise, which kind of branched off into its own thing, extremely loosely based on Dante's, whatever it's stupid called. Dante's Inferno, I think. It's a dumb book, I don't care for it. Anyways, so, mid-development, actually a little closer to late development of DMC1, when they were really starting to get the final touches, the final polishing going on, the executives came down, looked at some of the demos and some of the playtesting going on for DMC1 and said, wow, that looks awesome. Let's make a sequel. And thus was Devil May Cry 2 greenlit before Devil May Cry 1 was even finished. Now, on the one hand, you might think, oh, that actually makes perfect sense. On the other hand, this was a terrible idea on every level. Not because greenlighting a game before its original game is out is a problem, although that does have some problems, to be clear. But the problem was that they decided to start development of Devil May Cry 2 while development was still ongoing with the Devil Team on DMC1. Do you see the problem here? Because a lot of people in a lot of expensive suits who make a lot of money did not see any problem with any of this. So, development of DMC2 started immediately with what I can only refer to as the D-listers. No offense to the people who worked on this game, but Capcom actually shoved pretty much everyone who was not involved at Capcom, you know, the intern layer is what I'm talking about here, onto DMC2. These people had never made video games before, period. Never mind something of the level and style of a genre that was effectively being developed as they were developing it. So that really sucked. So the chaff were dumped onto this project, and I'm like, okay. Now here's the thing. For those of you who've played Devil May Cry 2, you might be thinking, they did pretty good for their first game. And I'd like to tell you that I agree with that. But I don't. Because the game that they made, we will not be seeing today. In fact, we've never seen it before. Because whatever they made, well, let's move over the timeline. Let's scooch forward a little bit. So DMC1 did come out, 2.16 million units. Huge, huge success, right? So everyone was like, yes, perfect. This is going to be great. Let's go check up on our DMC2. Where's the game? So actually, I'm skipping ahead a little bit too much. There's actually several months of a gap there before the executives came down and said, all right, DMC1 is selling like gangbusters. It's a great quarter. How's DMC2 going? DMC2 had no cutscenes, no Devil Trigger, no attacks, and no scenario. I left that last one for last because if you understand anything about game design, or movie design, or show design, or play design, book design, you know that scenario is the first thing you do. Scenario, for those of you who don't know, is basically your outline. He talks to here, then he goes to here, then he does this. You know, Cecil gets kicked out of the Red Wings, goes with his friend, loses his friend, takes over the child, uses that as a way to redeem him. That's your outline, right? That's your scenario. They didn't have anything. So they could have done a couple of things here because they had a release window, which they really wanted to hit because of Stupid. And I just, before we move forwards, I want to mention, I told you some of the competition Devil May Cry 1 had. Let me tell you some of the competition 2 had. Now, 2 didn't face the absolute juggernaut that was Grand Theft Auto 3. That would be crazy. Instead, 2 went up against Final Fantasy X-2, Pokemon Gen 3, Mario Kart Double Dash, Zelda Wind Waker, Sands of Time, Prince of Persia, a little game you might have heard of called Knights of the Old Republic was coming out that year. Oh, and Grand Theft Auto Vice City. Hang on. I saved the best for last. Because Devil May Cry 2 also went up against Frozen Throne. Now, if there's one game that can even beat GTA's sale figures at the time, it was freaking Warcraft. Frozen Throne was the juggernaut of this year. Yes, Warcraft 3 Frozen Throne. So, yeah, that was their competition. They were like, oh my god. Now, credit to somebody somewhere in Capcom's upper echelons. What they did was they pulled what I nowadays mentally think of as a Marvel. They looked at their staff, they looked at the people who were under their umbrella, and they found someone who didn't really have an impressive resume, but was really good at what he did. He was very talented at, it's going to sound crazy, managing a project. I know, crazy, but that was what he was known for. He could keep people coordinated, he could keep people on task, he could make things happen, he could act where it had to, etc. They got a good manager involved. That manager's name is Hideaki Itsuno. Now, if that name sounds familiar, it should. Sorry, if that name doesn't sound familiar, it should. Because he is the Devil May Cry guy. He made Devil May Cry 2 and 3 and 4 and 5. You may also know him as the guy behind Dragon's Dogma. So they brought in arguably their best manager and said, deal with this. Now, he's given a lot of interviews, including one this year, I just mentioned it earlier, about how nightmarish the process was. He came in and he was just like, oh, God. And he describes it in terminology that, not terminology, tone, excuse me, tonality, that just gets across what his words don't create. Yeah, everything was on fire. And as I mentioned, no scenario, no cutscenes, no double trigger, no attack designs, no nothing. So he was like, okay. And he sat down and he said, what's my goal? And they said, this game needs to ship in 2003. And there he was like, okay. So this is one of the reasons why I pushed back against Dakoita's comment earlier about the fact that DMC2 is surprisingly good for a first game. Let's be clear. Given all the behind the scenes I've already told you, DMC2 is surprisingly good. By the way, figures vary on this because of inconsistent information, but Itsuno showed up either 6 to 4 months before the game launched. Which means, in every way that mattered, Devil May Cry 2 was made in, at most, 6 months. Anyways, so yeah, he shows up and is like, all right, we got to do this. We got to make this playable. And manager, right? He did exactly what, honestly, I don't want to praise myself. He did exactly what I would have done. He got rid of all ambition, all desire to make a good game, and focused entirely on getting a game out the door that was playable. And that's Devil May Cry 2 in a nutshell. It is playable. Didn't used to be. just ship it. Just ship it. So they did a couple of things. There are a couple of things. They had a little tiny bit of extra development time to put some of his ideas in for the game. I actually got a list here, right here. So first of all, the ability to switch weapons in mid-combat was an innovation he added. The fact that you can change around the button layout, we'll discuss that as we go through it. And he invented the very concept of the Bloody Palace, which is actually in Devil May Cry 2. I don't know how many of you even knew that. Now, you're probably thinking, hold up. Lore, I've paid attention. Every time you bring up one of these unmovable deadlines, it's one of two things. It's either a quarterly return, or it's some external thing, like a tie-in merchandise or toys, or a show or whatever. Like, we literally just saw this happen with Pokemon Violet, where their release date was determined by other companies refusing to move their launch dates. So which is it here? Well, it's not the quarterly return. Well, I mean, it's a little bit quarterly return. But the main thing is it was a tie-in merchandising opportunity. Now, if you're thinking to yourself, what the hell was the tie-in merchandising to Devil May Cry 2? I'm actually kind of pleased by that. Because I'm glad that as few people know what I'm about to tell you as is possible. I want this information to stay dead and buried as a testament to how stupid of an idea this was. So one of the producers at Capcom used to work at Diesel Clothing, which, for those of you not aware, is a brand of clothing. So, they were the ones who set the absolute release date window. And they did tie-in branded merchandising. Both Lucia and Dante wear Diesel Edge clothing in Devil May Cry 2. Because there's a producer who used to work for the other company. There's actually several types of corruption in corporate existence, but that's one of them. So, with all that wonderful information out of the way, why don't we jump in and see just how much of a game this is. Now, before we move any further, I do want to mention something. The bottom 3 games we've ever reviewed are Quest 64, Mega Man X7, and Secret of the Stars. Obviously, we have the guessing game. But my question to you, like in a vacuum, is where in that bottom 3 do you think this game is going to land? Because with total sincerity, Devil May Cry 2 might be somewhere down there.
Dante.
Real quick, when you picture Dante in your head, what personality do you ascribe to him?
You called?
Till next time, son of Sparta.
Behold the man's charisma. By the way, that's Dante the whole game, so get used to that. I'm not going to be mean and dissect each individual point and give each point a negative, though I could. But that's not a good cutscene. It kind of establishes the tone of DMC2, but not in a good way, you know? This is Depression Dante, as some people have taken to calling him, and just awkward voice acting, an absence of dialogue, and storyboarding that is PS1 is what I want to call it. Now, that makes sense. Let's pause and talk about this for a second. So, let's say you're given a job of animating someone doing something like, say, grab. Now, the thing is, doing something like this and grabbing, anybody who's done any animation, Kay could probably talk about this better than I, knows that there's all kinds of micro movements you don't really think about happening in this movement. Do you notice how my wrist was actually moving alongside there, just kind of naturally? Or how about the fact that my fingers are moving as I'm doing the whole animation, right? And just kind of, there's all kind of little things like how my arm is actually twisting here, or the elbow is moving to counter pulley the weight, and so forth and so on. All this little stuff is all the little nuances of animation that people have had to figure out how to make look good in order to make it look real. Nowadays, people use motion capture to try to get across this kind of stuff because you could just have an actor do that, and it's a lot easier to do that than trying to manually animate all this stuff. But when you have 4 or 6 months to do something like this, what you do is you have the basic animation, which looks extremely awkward. I can't even do it. I can't even do it properly because it's like this. Like, it's just, there's nothing there. There's the one pivot point on the elbow, and the hand just stays open up to the top, and then it closes once, right there. Just, and that's it. And that's the kind of animations we're seeing. In short, I'm saying this in a lot of words, as I am fond of doing, but I want to be very thorough in explaining why this is rushed. Rather than just saying the word rushed, I want to explain to you exactly how rushed this is. So, here's the in-depth, extensive combat of this game. This is not a joke. Alex brings up a good point. How did this game survive this particular... how did this franchise... This is loud. How did this franchise survive this particular game? This game sold 1.7 million units. Just on the PS2. Now, I'm not going to give the whole speech again, but if you remember my constant discussions on game sales figures, that's actually really, really, really good. Breaking 1 million units in general is excellent. And I already talked about this. A game that is very popular almost guarantees the next game is going to sell well. And a game that's bad almost guarantees the next one will sell worse. This is common trend going all the way back to the 70s. This is normal. So DMC 1 was a smash hit, so DMC 2 sold well. DMC 3 sold worse than this game initially. But if you count re-releases, it sells much, much better, because 3 is actually a good game. Notice how utterly devoid and empty this game is, by the way? That's not on purpose. But, 4 to 6 development time. I'm only pointing it out because the first game was devoid and empty because it was set in a freaking castle in the middle of nowhere. Where everybody was long since dead. This is set in several cities. And the empty, absent nature of the cities... I don't know, maybe I'm the only person it bothers, but it's like the actual opposite of Lindblom effect. It makes me wonder where the hell I am. Like, what holodeck program am I on? Because this is... Yeah, there's an absence of doodad design. There's an absence of brickwork design. There are copy-pasted textures everywhere. There's nothing here. No people, no movement, no ambient sound to speak of. It's just devoid. Contrast this to, and I know this is a weird one to pull out, 4. In 4, they actually bothered to try and make, especially some of the early levels, the cities actually look like frickin' cities! As opposed to, like, I'm sorry, look at this for a second. Look at what's on your screen. Really take in everything wrong with this. I bet Kay could point out some stuff that I'm not even catching here, but there's just everything wrong with this screen. From the fact that you can tell where the chunks of geometry were just kind of slammed onto each other, like right here, and here, and here, and here. Or maybe the fact that this texture for this road clearly should be to the point where that building is several feet that way. But and you can see, like, look close to his feet there. Ignore the fact that his foot's going through the ground for just a second. Do you see how there's another side of that? Like over here on the right, you can see there's a I don't know what that's called. It's the side of the road. But there's no left side of the road because it's under the building. I'm not even go into the fact that everything here is a texture. And a bad one. We're literally looking at blocks. Hang on. Guys, I think we're under the well in Kakariko. You know what this is? I'm gonna stop making fun of the backgrounds for the moment, I swear. Have you ever seen a game that has, like, a city in the distance that you can't actually go to, right? Like, Arkham City is a good example of this. There's actually Gotham on the other side of the river, right? That's what this is. This is the extra little bit of city that's not fully designed because you're not supposed to be able to walk around in this area. The actual gameplay is way over there, but this is here so you can see it in the background. Now, I don't want to comment on this, but please remember for a moment that the scenario was not written until Itsuno got involved. Which means this story about a corporate executive who's working for the demons happened after that severe time crunch was placed upon him and the rest of the staff. Not that I'm implying anything, just pointing out facts. You know, it's impressive when a game is just this murky. Like, this takes work, you know? Some talented people sat down and said, alright, hang on. But what if we have 2 different shades of brown? Only 2. And we just use them everywhere. Someone else is like, hold up. What if we make the water have about a 2-second animation loop of those 2 shades of brown? Brilliant! Also, I missed my family because I've been working in my office for 4 months straight. Yeah, that's why I kind of added that little joke at the end of my visuals joke earlier, because I actually legitimately feel bad for the people who worked on this game. I really do. This game is trash. It's probably going to get the garbage tag. But, you know, at least it's understandable why it's trash. You know what I mean? I can't think of a positive for Ride to Hell Retribution. Even DMC2 might get one positive. Thought about during the lunch break. We'll see. Yep, that's a map with no indicator. Oh my God, it's if you ever need to see exactly how copy paste this game is, pull up the map every now and again. No indicator of where you are. No indicator of doors. I'm just going to give this away later on. This is going to be much less useful, like when we get to the corporate offices areas. We'll jot down map and we'll try it out in the actually terrible areas. I feel like this will be helpful information. Maybe. I don't know. I might be wrong. Let's see. What do we got? What do we got? Croatia! Wrong thing. Hang on. Sorry. This is Croatia. My bad. I mean, there's nothing wrong with Croatia. But that's not what I want to show you. What I want to show you was this. This is the map for Metroid Prime 1. A game which, for those who care, came out before this game. I should mention that this map is rotatable. And you can, like, move around on the map, too. Now, this is not the best 3D map made in the history of the ever. But this is a surprisingly serviceable and functional map. It shows the actual geometry of the rooms. It shows where the connecting points are, and, of course, what types of doors are in the way. And it also shows where you are, where you're facing, and it will show you other things on the map, like where you're going, or where certain things have been scanned, or whatever. So, it's not the greatest, but it still blows this completely out of the water. And as always, I like to do these side-by-side comparisons, because it's just different when you have it in your head versus when you could literally see the difference in map design there. Oh, and by the way, this is for a fully 3D game. This is for a game that pretends it's 3D, but is actually a 2D game. So, there's that, too. So, I should talk about timelines a little bit. This is still a lore run, after all. In the original setup, it was 3, 1, 2. So, as I was trying to say, the original idea was that 2 was way into the future, like by quite a bit. And I actually did a little looking into this, and while 2 hasn't been officially retconned out of existence, it kinda has. It kind of doesn't matter anymore. And now it only occurs a little bit into the future of 1, as opposed to way in the future of 1. The reason this is relevant is because 4 and 5 now occur after 2. Which means this fits into the timeline even less than it already did. Which is pretty impressive when you think about it. That's it. Dante just had dental surgery. And so he's sitting there going the whole time. And everyone's like, why isn't he talking? He's so cool. Shh, shh. Don't try to bother him. And that's just the whole game. Behold the extensive lore of Devil May Cry 2. I remember this part. This is a very common problem in DMC2. So there's this thing called balancing. Most people tend to think of balancing as in combat, but there's actually all kinds of balancing that goes into game design. Platforming, balancing needs to be a thing. Timing, puzzles, hints, who you can interact with when. There's all kinds of work that goes into making sure a game is properly balanced, regardless of the genre. Balancing more than anything else in game design, takes one thing more than anything else. And I'm going to say more than anything else one more time just to really hammer this point in, because it's really important. It takes time. There are quite a few elements of DMC2 which are not balanced. This is one of them. Well, most beat-em-up games do that, Evo. I'm not sure I'm super in favor of it, but it's basically the same thing as having a random encounter in an RPG. Or an encounter in an RPG. It's complete the encounter to progress. So I wouldn't say I have a universally negative reaction to it, just that it's a reaction. One moment, please. Question man just was like, hey, lore! And I'm like, okay, shush. There. Quit whining at me. Question man, jeez Louise. There we go. Hey, Blue Wolf Alex. I strongly recommend you immediately stop watching the stream. It's the Google refresh thing, Zalok. Question man did exactly what he was supposed to be. So did you like that? I bothered to do that because I wanted to show off how they have this giant open arena for no reason. Big empty space. Nothing there. Not even a bonus thing. Oh, we're dead. Good. So, I wanted to show this off at least at some point, so... Of all the many negatives in this game, one thing I will not give is for the checkpoints, believe it or not. I know it's shocking. There are checkpoints. It's weird. So, there it is. Probably the most memed-on enemy in the game. This is the infested helicopter. So I mentioned earlier that I started doing the... I mentioned earlier that I started doing the all-gun playthrough at a certain point throughout the game. Because up until a certain point in the game, I had been meleeing, because of course I had. I played DMC 1 before I played DMC 2. So, this is the exact moment I started using the gun. And I never stopped, really. I just kind of shot my way through the entire rest of the game. Yeah, it's okay. It's okay. It's Devil May Cry 2. Of course, the office is on fire. Notice its health has been completely reset, regardless of how the previous fight went. Well, that's a thing that happened. Do you remember where this is? Because I do. Wow. This is 3 tanks and 2 copters ago, if you're paying attention. Well, there's the only positive I was planning to give this game. It's okay. We actually have to fight the thing this time. Correct. This is a thank you stream to Bragwin, Raximus, and Valverdix. For being a mod, and being a mod, respectively. This is also the last, or excuse me, second to last of the thank you streams. What? Dad! Dad! Save me, Dad! Alright, this is it. The in-depth lore of the game. You ready for this? Hang on, let me upgrade first. Okay, so let me have nowhere near enough things to upgrade. Okay, here we go. Behold the glory! Yeah, you were expecting a cutscene, weren't you? What game did you think you were playing? Yeah, so if you were paying attention to that, I do want you to really think about this. We started off on ground level in the streets, chased an infested helicopter to the top of a building, then to a second building, and then to a third building, killed it, and jumped down. The ground level, where we started. You realize I'm back here, right? Do you realize I'm back here? I'm not sure he does. Look at him! This is it. Story time! Okay, there's an oil derrick. Oh my god, it's Fallout 2. So did you like that story? Hope you enjoyed that. See, I'm kind of in a similar perspective, but with an extra layer there for me, Huthor. If a character has character, most of the time I would prefer they be properly voiced. If a character does not have character, then I think they should have character. I used to be on a slightly different stance on that, but the older I get and the more I analyze fiction, the more I disagree with younger me. And, you know, make the stance I just told you about 5 seconds ago. Admittedly, a little bit of analyzing FF14 earlier this year really solidified that opinion for me. The amount of times the story sucked, specifically because we either weren't a character or were not a part of the scene, that happened pretty often. Actually, yeah, Franklin, so let's use a counterexample here. Franklin over in GTA 5 is a perfect example of why I tend to be against the idea of characters not having character. You'll notice Franklin is both well acted, I might add, and well animated, but he is an absence of character. He is the blank slate. The story of GTA is the story of Michael and Trevor. Franklin is the player character. And you can tell, I've discussed this, I've done a lore run of the game. The game is clearly structured around that. But it just doesn't work. It feels out of place and off in a series that is as story-focused as the GTA series arguably always has been. I know the old joke is GTA has lore, but the thing is GTA Super does have lore and a strong story focus, and always has. So just having that silent character there doesn't really work. I say silent. Non-characterized character is what I meant.
Caution.
Caution what? Caution, you were playing Devil May Cry 2. God damn you, game. You want to target the boss, game? That was a boss fight. So the reason we fought that thing was because they were aliens, alright? Now these aliens were busy dropping off the frog on the way to reunite with the dragon. But unfortunately, the aliens kind of missed. They accidentally got Dante, and they're like, oh crap, what do we do with him? And they're like, I don't know, drop him off in Mothra's lair, and they're like, alright, go. And then Mothra's like, dude, what are you doing? And it's just all rightfully pissed off at the intrusion. So Mothra's like, all right, look, listen. I'm going to make you a deal. My children, which I'm going to spawn every few seconds, like a dick, are going to eat you alive. Now, here's the deal. There's actually this whole cultural thing about suicide within Mothra's culture. They absolutely venerate the idea of dying at peak happiness. Because if you die when you're at your happiest, then your life is more fulfilled than it can otherwise be. Like, if you just keep enduring past that moment, it's all downhill, right? Like, you're never going to get back to that moment. Now, this coincides with the fact that devils and demons, and especially half-demons, taste really good. Like, think of the best food you have ever eaten in your life, and then magnify that by a factor of 10. So, what Mothra does is starts tossing her larva out and saying, all right, larva, go and eat Dante. And so they enjoy the meal, and there's just this moment of pure ecstasy before Dante breaks out of them, killing them at the moment of their total joy. You like all these PS1 graphics in this game, by the way? There's a lot of them. I've been pointing them out as we go. Game! God damn it! Do you remember I mentioned quite a while ago that stun locking thing where you just kind of get stun locked trying to get up because you're being all flourishy and fanciful about it? Well, the reason I was so irritated by that, and will give that a negative, is because occasionally it actually matters. Like here. So let me show you where we're at right now. So far we have this many story positives, this many story negatives, this many gameplay positives, and this many gameplay negatives. And that's where we're at so far. In about half an hour to 40 minutes, we'll be streaming some D&D over on Guido's channel. You can type !Guido to get a link to the channel, because they got rid of hosting, because Twitch is stupid. Otherwise, tomorrow, starting at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, we'll be playing more of this. And we're not even up to the Argosax fight yet.
Must obtain the power of Argosax, or I cannot transcend all living things.
Too easy.
You cannot win. Someone is holding you back.
Forget about me. Kill Arius.
Don't worry. I've got you.
We have literally doubled the amount of lines we had in just that cutscene. Oh, speaking of which, Zach Taft asked a question.
You save me. I was created
Which I'll get to in a second.
by him,
Every hero has a weakness.
but the ritual was activated because of me.
What?
There's still time.
We have until the sun is completely eclipsed. But how are you going to enter the building? The entrance is...
Where there's a will, right?
I have absolutely no idea what's going on with these cutscenes, and I know the lore of this game. Yeah, there's an eclipse starting, and it's something bad. It was activated by her. She was made by Arius. Arius is doing something. There's an explosion. I'm not sure why we have to get into a building that we literally just leapt out of. Again. I have a concept I call story sequencing. Story sequencing is what I like to call the connective tissue in between moments in a story. It's actually really important for storytelling, and a surprisingly large number of fiction doesn't know how to do good story sequencing. Most of it's just kind of generic, of course, but every now and again we run into something, game, movie, show, book, or play, where the story sequencing is actively nonsensical to the point where you're wondering, why are we doing this now? And the answer is, of course, because it's the next plot point. But, like, there's no in-universe reasoning for why we've decided to charge up a building, to take out an infested helicopter, to charge back down, to go into a ruins section, to then go and infiltrate a corporate building, to fight a guy, then to leave, and now we're... What? There's no connective tissue. There's no logic here. That's terrible. My television production teacher used to make fun of me because he was like, you just want to go against the grain. I was like, no, I just disagree with the grain. There's a difference. Correct, Linnaeus. I feel the marriage of the 24 frames per second thing is just irritating and honestly completely out of date. Like, I can tell you why it started, but that's decades old at this point. We have technology now to make movies in 60 frames per second. Now, hang on. The manager in me also dislikes the 24 frames per second thing, because I'm sure some of you in chat do know, but do you know how much crap has to be done in post, and in pre, actually, in order to make sure that the film looks right when doing 24 FPS? We've actually talked about this before. Here, I'll go and make this a topic. Because one of the reasons that video games tend to look worse when they lower the frame rate is because of the nature of the medium, and they're not doing anything to make up for the lower frame rate. But films have tricks upon tricks upon tricks upon tricks in order to try and make it so that that 24 FPS doesn't look literally unnatural. But all of those tricks take time and time and time and money. Aw. Well, thank you, Justin. You don't have to not lurk, really. It's just... First of all, thank you. I will put that towards the Zelda block. There's no good way to track viewership. It doesn't exist. It's not possible. It's one of those situations. This is a real-life problem for a lot of things when trying to get statistics. Anybody who's done any kind of statistics will tell you about this. I think you're right, Valvedrix. So you have to decide what counts as a statistic, to what extent. Let me use a direct example. Viewership count, right? If someone clicks your stream on accident for 2 seconds and then immediately closes it, does that count? That's a decision you have to make. That's something you have to track. If someone, how many people... So one of the things Twitch likes to use as an example is how many people are concurrently viewing. What's your max concurrent viewers? That means how many people are on all at the same time, right? I don't like that particular figure because all that does is track peaks in your stream time. And if I'm being completely blunt, is also a misleading number for several other reasons. That's why I track chat. Now, one person could say one thing in a 4-hour stream and that counts, and therefore that's a little bit misleading, but at the same time, it's all I've got. It's the decision I've made. I've decided that of the various bad statistics that exist, I would prefer to keep track of how many people are at least interested enough in engaging. And I should also mention that if let's use a direct example, because I do have something to track this. Let's say, random example, let's say Kay shows up and throws some giant ASCII dick pic up in chat. Now, I then immediately ban Kay, because how could you do that, Kay? However, with that ban, that actually removes him from counting. He no longer counts as someone who has chatted because his messages got deleted. So, because of the fact that Kay is so horrible... Sorry. I'm poking fun. I apologize. Yeah, exactly, Charlito. Because I can keep a degree of control over who counts and who doesn't, I think that's about as accurate as I could possibly get for viewing figures. Is even if someone shows up and says at least something, as long as they're not a bot or a dick, which will get banned, which will discount it, they're at least engaged enough to bother to say something, right? Ergo, that's actually specifically the metric I go for. See, that's an interesting question, Blade Tavol, and I've been thinking about that for a minute, and I think... Yes, I think bad kit qualifies as bad gameplay. Not absence of kit, bad kit. You know why? Because bad kit means one thing. Boring. If this is melee combat, this is melee combat. This is kind of it. We got that, and this. And that's it. That is melee combat in this game. That qualifies as bad kit. So, let's say you're playing a Mega Man game. I don't care which one. Pick one that's good. And you go through the Mega Man game, and you only ever have the lemons. No weapons, no rush, no charge, no slide. Now, I know that's a weird one to point out, because I actually like to do Buster-only challenge runs. But if that was all that was to the game, that would suck. Because of absence of kit. What was the question, Loner? I guess you can't answer it. My question won't show up. Well, what's your question? Yeah, I don't mind doing Buster only as a challenge, as a self-imposed challenge. But yeah, going through I don't know, Mega Man 5, which is one of my personal favorites, with Buster only would be awful. Spartan had a question. There it is. Do I ever look at a corridor of a particular counter of a game that I know and love and just rage to myself, how much of my life have I spent on this particular thing? Yeah, I've played Final Fantasy XIV. Oh, thank God, we're out of the demon world. Whew! We're just in corporate America. You know, since this is probably going to be a minute, why don't I go ahead and just explain the extensive, in-depth lore of Devil May Cry 2. So back in the day, there were these two supremely powerful demonic princes. Both of them were vying for control over the Demon King. Who was the Demon King? No idea. Doesn't matter. Those princes were Mundus and Argosax. Now, both of them were rivals. Both of them wanted to take over the rulership of the demon world for themselves. However, in the end, neither of them could really claim it universally. So instead, they decided to split rulership of the demon world between them. Then, about 2,000 years ago, keep that in mind, Sparta was like, dude, what are you doing? Quit it. And beat Mundus. Sealed Mundus away. Remember that, too. And then Mundus was like, well, shoot. Argosax then took over the entire demon world and ruled the entire demon world. Then about 1,000 years pass, and this is when the timeline starts to fall apart, because after 1,000 years of Argosax completely ruling the demon world, he decides, you know, it'd be cool. I feel like ruling the human world, too. So he decides to go and conquer the human world. That's when the Guardians, that's what Metria, or whatever her stupid name is a part of, and Lucia, are like, yeah, we're going to go and stop you, because we don't particularly want to be ruled by Argosax. So Argosax is defeated by Sparta, and sealed away, as usual. And we're dead. Cool. So, when Argosax was defeated 1,000 years ago, ... and then another 1,000 years pass, where absolutely nothing happens whatsoever. Okay, I'm being slightly facetious, but for the most part, nothing happens for that second millennia, other than something I could literally fit into a footnote. Then, Mundus, who is free now, never explained, decides to go ahead and kill off Eva, excuse me, that's Dante's mother, and Sparta. Now, then we're going to enter another little ... period, because you're probably thinking, Lord, tell me the in-depth, extensive lore of how Sparta died. I'd love to. Would you believe that in 6, technically, games and an anime, and some little side novel kind of stuff, there is no information on what actually happened to Sparta. He's just gone. Anyways, the reason this is all relevant is the final boss of this game is Argosax, who is now trying to free himself once again because he's dumb. Now, if I might be so bold, this timeline might at least be the kind of thing we can headcanon through a couple of loops to make sense, right? We can look back at it and say, okay, hold on. So, Sparta, Mundus takes over. He eats the Qliphoth. Remember that for later. He eats the Qliphoth fruit, becomes super powerful, fights all the other demons, takes over the demon realm. Sparta fights against him because of God, as we've already talked about. And Sparta's like, all right, look. And Mundus gets sealed away. And then Sparta goes on to just kind of the Qliphoth. Don't worry, it's spelled even worse than it sounds. And Sparta goes off, kind of does his own thing. He gets involved with the Fortuna people, right? Like, all that stuff happens from 4. And then, at the end of it all, Mundus has successfully broken out enough to actually do something, starts sending out orders and sending out minions and gathering power to himself, makes the assault on Sparta's family. We're cool. The problem is they insisted on shoving this extra millennia in the middle here by forcing Argosax to be a part of this story. This is a very repetitive song. So, Argosax is just kind of crudely shoved into the middle, which already causes issues timeline-wise. Because what that means is that Mundus was sealed away for 2 millennia, and Argosax ruled everything for a millennia, uninterrupted, and nobody gave a crap or did anything about it. And then there's also another extra millennia of nothing in the middle there. But hang on. The real problem with Argosax is that wonderful, terrible problem. I don't actually have a Lorium for this, but it's the Dragon Ball Z problem, right? This is an enormously common problem in fiction. All right, so the last villain was Bob. So the next villain has to be just as powerful as Bob, or even more powerful than Bob. Bob plus one. Yeah, right? And then the next villain will be Bob plus two. And that's the problem with Argosax in a nutshell. Now, I should probably mention for just a second that it is possible to introduce a brand new character, usually a villain, who is even more deadly or powerful or terrifying than the previous one. But it's hard to do. It requires care and effort. There's not even like one thing you can do to make it right. You won't even believe number 10 on the list of things you can do to make this work. But the way it works is by care and effort and work. You have to actually work for it. If you don't, what you have is Argosax, who is totally just as powerful and just as overwhelming and is just as much of a demon king as Mundus was. Trust us, wink. Cashel has tasked me with making a proper remake, or let's call it what it is, a reimagining of DMC2. How do I expand upon the threadbare story and characters of the game into something worthwhile that adds substance to the series as a whole? I'll open that one to the board, too. Okay. This is the most obvious change by far, but make Dante Dante and not whatever this nonsense is. I know this is going to probably raise some hackles, but actually I'm going to take that back a little bit. Don't make Dante Dante. I don't think that would work. Make Dante Lady. Canonically, at this point in time, she's already working for the Devil May Cry branches and already been doing some work with Morrison. Make Lady the main character of this game. Change the playstyle substantially to accommodate something they've already hinted at several times. Have Lady be the one who goes off to this random corporate area because Dante's busy with whatever and or doesn't care. So she's going through this whole thing. Establish a little bit more of who the protectors are, do a little bit of world building for the greater world, emphasize a bit of the background element that there's actually multiple different, let's call them not quite cults throughout the world, all of which are cults of Sparta that Sparta specifically set up during the giant gap in between Mundus's defeat and Argosax's, and the death of his family. So Sparta basically established all these cults on purpose, like the one on Fortuna, but also the one here, as a defense against demons, knowing that someday he wouldn't be here, so he wanted humans to be armed with knowledge and tools. Lady goes through this game, pulls out, several of the Sparta demonic artifacts, which of course work for her because of her particular backstory. And there you go. Make Argosax, make corporate evil guy, some corporate evil guy who stumbled across the knowledge of demonic artifacts and demonic power and said, man, I can't wait to get my hands on some of that there power. That's fantastic. And yeah, we could also, if we wanted to flesh this out, since this is a full reimagining, we could say that Lady is pulled out here. But the cult she's working for is actually subverted. The only reason I'm hesitant to do that is because that's exactly what happens in 4, but whatever. The point being, there's stuff we could do with that, and there's stuff we could do with Corporate Dude. Corporate Dude could also be like, I've got an idea. Hear me out. Demons. And I could picture, I want you to picture the cutscene. I want you to picture the board meeting where he's out there and there's a whole bunch of boring people in suits. And corporate guy, who I'm going to keep calling corporate guy because that's so much of a character he is walking through being like, all right, everyone, I've come up with our next major product line. It's going to really be boosting our quarterly return. It's going to ensure that we have a really good ROI going forwards. Ladies and gentlemen, demons. And then everyone's going to look at him weird. Because the one person's going to kind of awkwardly laugh. Is that like a brand name? And one other person says, ooh, an energy drink. I like that idea. And someone says, yeah, let's get... And they start, like, talking amongst themselves about all the different products they can make with the demon brand. And the whole time, corporate guy is just like, no, you're not getting it. And so then he summons a demon, and they freak out, and the demon kills them all, and it's really, really just silly. Like, just make it as ridiculous. Like, have him ranting. Make him this kind of just almost non sequitur character. It's like, don't you understand? Why are you running? Why are you running? Stop running! The demon works for me, you idiot! God, I just painted that wall. What are you? And yeah, just make the whole thing super cartoony, right? Really lean into it. And then he's just like, okay. Betty, two things. First of all, send me some candidates for a new board, staff board members. And second of all, cancel lunch. I'm not in the mood all of a sudden. Pause. And send me up a latte, would you please? And that's how you establish areas. That's what I would do with Devil May Cry 2. Note to self, throw that in slow-mo. I want people to see that. Here, give me one moment. Oh, let's just... If you're paying attention, this is almost identical to the previous fight, except for the introduction of the Lucia clones. Arius himself is just as boring as he was last time. I think he has 2 new moves, and I think you've already seen both of them. And that's the Arius fight.
No! My dream! My life! I was going to be the king of this world!
King? Yeah. Here's your crown.
So, I actually did that death on purpose because I wanted to show off that the shotgun attack actually does spawn multiple projectiles and each one does damage. So if you're up close, that's what happens. So, if there's ever a fight that really, really wanted you to be ranged, it's this one. Yeah, I usually save this one for later for obvious reasons. This is the recovery head. What's funny is this could be an even worse fight. Imagine all the heads fight you at the same time. Imagine the heads respawn. Zero lines of dialogue. Only character with less lines than Dante. So this is the ending.
Yeah. Let's go all the way to hell.
That's it. I was so eager to play this game. Wolfed down my lunch because of how much I wanted to play this game. Welcome back to Devil May. I'm your host. Okay. Got it all out. So, guess who's back? So, what I mean by that is game development costs may have gone up under certain circumstances due to deliberate actions. And inflation is a real thing, although that's a whole other topic. What am I doing? That I don't actually want to discuss right now. But inflation is... you know what? Can we just leave inflation out of it? Because if we bring inflation into it, then the only thing I could say without spending 2 hours discussing inflation is that inflation is an invalid reason to raise the price. Let's just say that and move on. So, if we ignore inflation, the only remaining reason is because of two big factors. One, games developers have been insisting more and more upon spending more and more upon certain titles. Game development itself hasn't actually gotten more expensive. In fact, it's gotten cheaper in several ways. What am I listening to? It is more, there's more tools available for more reasonable prices and more people who have more understanding and more capacity to design than there ever has been. In fact, I would be so bold as to say that I think, don't have perfect evidence of this, that game development is cheaper now, even for AAA, than it used to be. Now, if you're hearing this and you're thinking, Lore, how can that possibly be? Ignoring inflation, but also everything they keep telling us, why do they keep saying it's more expensive? Because they're not spending that extra money on the game. The game development isn't more expensive. It's everything else. I think that's the bad guy. So, we've got marketing budget, which, obviously good marketing is good marketing, but most developers and publishers wouldn't know good marketing if it walked up and smacked them in the face. The second thing we've got is spending way too much money on the overhead, both good overhead and bad overhead. Then you've got the ridiculous amount of money that has to be cycled back into the investors in order to make sure that the company is constantly making more money. That's 3 giant siphons of money, none of which have anything to do with game development being cheaper or more expensive than it used to be. Anyways, so Plutonius says, modern audiences continuously insist upon higher production values, which is what's driving cost of development up. Okay, so I don't disagree with that, but I disagree that it's a valid excuse. Let me use a parallel here, because I don't know how to explain it linearly, because I don't know how to talk without using analogies. Let's say that you run a restaurant, and your restaurant goers are like, hey, that was great, but like, could you give it to me 5 seconds faster? And they never stop saying that. Now, let's assume that this same restaurant then starts arguing that they need to start charging more and more money, and basically becoming a worse company and making everything worse, simply because they need to keep up with this, let's call it what it is, artificial demand. Like, it's a cyclical thing here. Insistence upon trying to maintain the level of income that they're going for is exactly what's driving the desire to reach as large of an audience as possible, which is exactly what's causing the costs to go up, which is exactly what's causing them to insist on raising their prices, which is exactly what's causing it just goes around in a circle. And I've already lost track of it because I'm trying to keep track of the fight, because those stupid things can absolutely piss me off. Yeah, those guys right there. Thank you. But I hope you get my point, and I hope I'm getting across at least partially, because I'm probably not. I could summarize my point very clearly. Modern audiences continuously insist on higher production values. Sucks to be them. Also, while I'm on the subject, I feel like modern audiences demand such and such sounds a little bit too much like modern audiences require mobile gacha games that are horrifically predatory and frankly horrible. Because you could argue that, because those games make literally billions of dollars. But I feel like that's not really analyzing the reality of the situation. Wow, I could not get up again. That is such a... Have I given a separate negative for that? I don't think I have. The modern audiences demand predatory practices. Modern audiences demand horrific monetary policies. I do think that the idea of... I can't even think what it's called now. Thingy Mabobber Wong. Jesus Christ, I hate this fight so much. Oh god, now I'm just thinking about other things and trying to keep track of these goddamn larvae! Okay, the Thingamabarbawar, which is, Space Camp! It's your dance to your chance, it's the Space Camp! Alright, 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 alright. Okay, right. There's a concept, which I myself have talked about a lot. It's, I usually refer to it as broad audience, but what it means, in more simple terms, is the width of the ocean, but the depth of the puddle, right? That's a broad audience game. That also applies to movies and books and shows and music and all kinds. Generic is a word often used for that, but what it means is the same general thing. It is something that is designed to be liked by as many people as possible, and therefore, by design, is as undesigned as possible. Unappealing as possible, right? The visual I always like to do, and I'm doing this mostly for the highlight reel, because I know you've seen this all the time, is you can either focus all out here and get all these people, or you could focus up here and get just a smaller group of people, but really get these people, really have, you know, a really high quality product within that particular avenue, whatever it is you're going for, right? So, having said that, I do absolutely think that there is a thing amongst a lot of AAA developers of trying to make more games like this, that they want more games like this because, and this just keeps coming back to the same core point, of the fact that they want all the money. They don't want to make money. They don't want to be a successful business. They want to have growth. You'll notice how many things come back to that problem. Where the hell are we?
I was created?
Like, okay, hold on. So let's rewind for a second here. So first of all, let's say you decide to price a game based on how many units you think it's going to sell. That's extremely problematic in every direction. It's also kind of what do you call it? It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you price a game lower, then it will sell more units. Like, that's one of the most fundamental economic principles that exist, which is astonishing given how few companies actually understand that. I'm just going to skip this. Yeah, selling more of a product also allows you to lower a price. Naturally, most companies don't do that because if they sell more of a product, they want to make more money, growth. So they don't actually think about any sort of long-term sustainability. They just want to make more money now, quarterly report, yada, yada, yada. I feel like I'm repeating myself, but you get the overall idea. Okay, well, anyways, while I figure this out. So the hypothetical situation of, would I be okay with... How do I explain this? Would I be okay with a niche game charging more because it's a better game? That's very dangerous territory for a lot of reasons. Because the only way that would be okay with is in reality land, which is not where we live. We're talking about corporate land here. If you somehow know that your game is good before it comes out, which I should probably mention sounds like a weird statement, but historically speaking, most people do not seem to know that games are good before they come out. And decide to charge more for that game because it's a better game, that's a little bit questionable. And on the face of it, paying more, because that's... Jesus Christ, this is so irritating. Hang on a second. Paying more for higher quality just makes a basic amount of surface level sense, right? Like, this is a good product, therefore I'm paying more of it for it. We're cool. But again, that only applies on like a tip system. And there's no real way to practically implement such a thing, right? Unless you do tip DLCs, which, now that I'm saying that out loud, I should probably mention, there are game developers, usually small indie developers, who have implemented tip DLCs. I should explain what I mean by that, for those of you, especially for those of you who don't live in the United States. So there's this concept in the United States called tipping. It's problematic and has a lot of problems with it, but that's neither here nor there. The point is, you did a good job. I want to give you a little bit of extra money on top of your salary as a thank you for the high-quality service I just received. That's the tip, right? Tips... Yeah, exactly. Head-On actually does you have a tip DLC. Come on, game. My god, come on. It is a DLC that gives you nothing, really. You buy it because you liked the game, and you want to give them a tip. Make sense? Now, as I'm saying this out loud, I would actually be pretty in favor of this kind of a system if this was the kind of thing that a company wanted to start implementing. The problem is I don't think that that would be feasible from a long-term financial perspective, and of course it would be abused to hell and back, because you know it would. But just in reality land, and not financial land, I, the individual... Jesus Christ, this goddamn game! Why? Do you not understand what the button jump means? Why are you programmed this way? What monkey decided to crawl out of what primordial ooze and just flop around on the ground, and then all of a sudden, 5 seconds into your newfound existence, you were like, oh hey, I've decided to make a video game! And then you made Ride to Hell Retribution. But then you decided to make this piece of garbage! I feel like making a system for tip DLCs would go amiss. I don't think that would work out all that well. And I feel like, you know, the modern audience thing that Plutonia was just talking about would probably get in the way, because there probably would be the masses, I hate to use that phrase, but, you know, the common audience or whatever, would look at that and be like, I need X, Y, or Z. And then tip DLCs would go from being, please give a little bit of extra money to the developer, to here's a bunch of extra money for, you know, some completely unrelated thing, or for some bonus, or from some actual in-game benefit. At that point, it's just a microtransaction. Worse, and this is the worst part, I guarantee you that extra money that we'd pay for tip DLCs wouldn't go to the developers. Which is where it should go. And yeah, honestly, yeah, Kickstarter benefits are already a tactical, tangible, tactile version of what I'm talking about. And then there's the problem of expectation. Like it or not, human psychology tends to lean towards, I have done X, therefore I expect Y. And that has its whole huge list of problems. Anyways, this is a massive answer to your question. I hope it's getting somewhere approaching an actual answer. Morpheal, that's it. Hogger's a better fight than this. You know what? That is an objectively true statement. You know why? Because Hogger is a fight that will probably actually get a plus to gameplay. And this is a fight that will absolutely get negatives to gameplay. Therefore, by objective truth, Hogger is a better boss battle than this. And in fact, every boss in this game that we've so far seen. You can quote me on that. Yeah, this fight is almost identical. In fact, it is identical to the last time I fought him. It was just that bad then. And we're done. Yep, I'm a fascist! You knew it! You got it! Shark supremacist, that's me. Go Sharks. Not the team, they suck. He became a PS1 boss. Truly, the most horrible of fates. F's in chat for Phantom. So, this is one of the more challenging fights in the game. Very little margin for error. Even a slightest screw-up could lead to catastrophic failure. I mean, that's pretty much my life, Robostall. Terrible, boring, awful life, but it's okay because I get stream chat. Came a little close there, but first try, so... well, technically, I kind of came straight from YouTube to stream, so I kind of had a pre-baked audience. Having said that, as far as having regular activity on my stream chat, it took a few years. I'll never get the FF Marathon and the long, empty swaths of nothing, because there wasn't anybody talking. Second to last mission, by the way. We're actually slamming through this, which is great. I almost feel bad for throwing up the cheat flag. Almost. Could you link me that on Discord instead, Hazardous, so I don't have to... like, pause stream, basically? Oh, I remember Valvatrix. Set up our own IRC channel just for the stream. Thanks. So, this is gonna sound pathetic, but I don't mean it like that, Lunaruth. I'm used to it. You kind of get used to doing something because you want to, and nobody giving a damn. I mean, how many people do you think have actually watched the World of Lorecraft series? I poured my heart and soul into that. Nobody cares. Same thing with the theater. And the same thing with a lot of things back in the day. You know, did you know I've been writing music since I was in high school? Nobody listens to my music because nobody cares. So you kind of get used to it after a while. And after a while, I decided to just sort of do it for myself. You know? I wanted to stream, so I streamed. I wanted to do the Lorecraft, so I did that. I wanted to do the theater, so I did that. I want to do the rewrite, so I'm doing that. It's cliched, but it's true. Also, I'm happy to hear at least a few people watch the Lorecraft series. Absolutely, Loner. There have been plenty of points in my life where I have not been capable of having a creative outlet. All. That sucked. Like, to use the equivalent for Lunaruth, imagine you just can't sing, can't guitar, can't anything. For years. It's right! We're gonna get up here, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do this right! Or, I mean, sorry, hi. Dude, so I had one of my commenters recently say, hey, I've looked for name of video and I can't find it. So I gave them a link to it, and they were confused, like, that's what I was searching for, why didn't I find it? My response was, if you ever wondered what me and other YouTubers are talking about when we say that YouTube buries our videos, you have now experienced it firsthand. Because YouTube turbo buries my channel. I think I literally do everything wrong to get YouTube to self-promote me on the algorithm. Length of videos, types of videos, I don't do the shorts, I don't do the posts or the comments, or the polls, excuse me. I filter comments as they come in, which actually hurts some of the internal figures. I don't monetize. Just everything wrong. Yeah, no clickbait. I don't farm for views. Yeah, don't chase trends. Like, seriously, you can just go down the list. I do everything wrong. On purpose, obviously, but still. Don't like, share, or subscribe. I hate that crap. God, I hate that crap. I hate all of it, but that's been such a pet peeve of mine for so many years. Like, comment, and subscribe! Did you know that statistics show that if you actually tell someone to like, comment, and subscribe, they are 30% more likely to do so? Hate that crap. Less than 50% of my viewers click my subscribe button. And that's why today's video is sponsored by Raid Shadow Legends. And me hitting the wrong button. Where's my Beetle stuff? Brought to you by Beetle Stuff. It goes in your nose! We've actually talked about that a few times, Ross. At the end of the day, the answer is no. Even a theoretical sponsor that I actually support wouldn't be worth the loss of face and trust to do so, and they wouldn't be able to afford me, to be blunt. I haven't had time, Lunaruth. I did, however, see that someone else whose name I can't think of right now did do a video on established titles. But yeah, like, there's two problems with... I've talked about this many times, so forgive me for the repetition. There's two big problems with sponsorships, for me. One is, if someone sponsors me, and I take that sponsor, there's an automatic assumption that exists, a valid one, I might add, that implies or states outright that I'm just doing that for the money. I'm just shilling. In other words, don't actually buy this thing because I'm not actually sponsoring it. It's just they're paying me to sponsor them, which is a big difference. Even if I actually meant that, even if I legitimately wanted to say, go play Star Trek Online, it's a great game, which you should, because it is, it doesn't matter because there's an automatic presumption of the shilling, right? There's nothing I could ever do or say to make you convinced that it's something I actually support. It'll always just be a sponsorship. So that's problem number one. Problem number two is sponsors don't pay all that much for videos for channels as small as mine. I can get sponsorship videos. I've looked into it a couple times because, of course, I have. This is my job. Anyways, they don't pay much. We're talking maybe $500 for a sponsorship, which may sound like a lot, but when you consider that that's probably one sponsor, maybe a month, $500 a month is nothing. Oh yeah, that's the other thing. The only companies that even offer sponsorships are companies that I don't want to sponsor. I've actually talked about that before a lot. If you ever see a company spend way too much on advertising, that's a bad sign, not a good one. Like, have you ever... Yeah, NordVPN is... I was actually just about to use that example. Speaking of someone who used to be a network engineer, NordVPN is the worst VPN I have ever seen. Okay, hang on. I owe this to you, so... So, yeah, that's the Dieselware. Soak it in. Just take a moment. Devil May Cry 2 has a net negative of 26 to story. Yeah, I stand by that. That is a density of 2.6 negatives per hour. I'm unmuted, right? Yep, cool. And a positive ratio of 0. No, Lunaruth. The other thing, of course, is the gameplay side of things. Because Devil May Cry 2's gameplay scored negative 64. which is a density of 6.4 negatives per hour, which, believe it or not, is not our highest negative per hour density. That would be Mega Man X7, but that's pretty freaking high. Also, our gameplay positive ratio is 2.94%, which is not a record because we've had games that have 0. All of this gives us our final golden number. Now, before I give you this, at the bottom, we'll start with Drakengard. We've got Drakengard with negative 28.18. We've got Wolfenstein Youngblood with negative 28.40. We've got Star Trek Shattered Universe with negative 34.11. We've got Quest 64 with negative 48.35. We have Mega Man X7 with negative 50.46. And at the bottom, Secret of the Stars with negative 59.45. Ladies and gentlemen, Devil May Cry 2's final score is negative, I know, try to be shocked, 60.76. Just barely inching ahead of Secret of the Stars. Final thoughts. No, for real. I am astonished this game is as much of a game as it is. It's sold well because DMC1 was a smash hit. I wonder what the return figures are like. This game is utter trash. It's understandable why it's trash, but it's still trash. I don't know what else to add to that. Ironically, and for those of you who didn't catch this, if not for the Lucia campaign, it would be better, as is so common at the time. It is surprisingly good, considering it's the worst game I have ever reviewed, given the limitations that were put into it. I don't even know what else to add to this at this point. I really don't. I don't have a final thoughts. Tomorrow, at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, we'll be playing Devil May Cry 3, where I'll be suffering in a slightly different way for your amusement, and I do hope to see at least some of you there then.